Rajiv Mehrotra, author, writer, television producer, director, documentary filmmaker, a personal student of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for whom you manage as secretary the Foundation for Universal Responsibility, established with the Nobel Peace Prize. You are well known as a host of one of India's longest running talk shows, In Conversation, aired on India's national broadcast channel, Doordarshan. As a documentary filmmaker, producer, and commissioning editor, you've made 650 films. You have won 50 national awards from the President of India and over 285 national and international awards. You have authored 9 books in 50 editions and languages, including Conversations with the Dalai Lama, Thakur, a biography of Sri Ramakrishna, and Mind of the Guru. Rajiv, you've had an incredibly colored and diverse and rich interaction with people across the board. In conversations that you've had with the Dalai Lama, what are the perspectives that have been shared regarding our planet, nature, and our human relationship with nature? Rajiv, you're on mute.
Okay, here I am. I'm afraid you'll have to edit that. Well, thank you, Sangeeta, for the very sort of laudatory, embarrassing introduction. I really am deeply blessed and privileged to have met some inexplicable reason a lot of great men and masters who have been generous with their time and their patience with a struggling sadhaka. And of course, at the apex of that pyramid has been His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And he has a very sort of broad, inclusive, encompassing philosophy that goes beyond personal happiness to what he describes as universal responsibility. And so the foundation that I'm privileged to serve is called the Foundation for Universal Responsibility. And so I think that what that is really saying to us is that we are responsible not only for our own happiness and equanimity, but that of the universe, and not merely Mother Earth for that matter, but far beyond that. And so it is that sort of large vision. And and of course, he talks a great deal about, as do most spiritual traditions, about climate change and the crisis. And I think this operates at 2 levels, or many levels. And let me just look at it from the sort of the spiritual evolutionary perspective that the Buddhist tradition does, and then maybe we can go down some alleyways and see if that will shed light to the larger understanding of this. And we do not believe in a creator God or a creator intelligence as such, and Earth happened. We don't know how, whether there was a creator God or not a creator God. It really doesn't matter. The Earth is which we human beings today inhabit, and the significance and the importance of climate change for us as a species is also stems from the belief that the human form is the most valuable of forms in the evolutionary cycle. I mean, we could just have been born as insects or animals, or each one of us can have been in a myriad different forms. And so the crisis that we confront is not really a crisis of the planet per se, because the planet is capable of looking after itself. and the Earth will come back to life no matter what happens. Nations, people, and cultures may not, but the planet will continue. And it is really the putting the future of life at the heart of everything that we do is no longer central to our purpose and destiny, as it should be, because it is very precious. And why is it precious? It's because of all the life forms. It is the only life form that has volition. We can take decisions and we can make choices, and they have implications. All other forms of life go through a reflexive evolution and coexistence and a changing balance on the planet. And where the planet and those sentient beings sort of, as it were, on auto-reflexive engagement, keep evolving. And so you have different species of animals, you have the nature of the environment, the nature of the planet keeps changing. Its temperatures, its topography, and what have you. So it is as a species when we came along, or we evolved to progressively evolve, and I mean, when we look back in human history, we don't see a great deal of evolution in human intelligence and human activity and human functionality in that kind of time scale. But in the eons of lifetimes and the eons of times that philosophy, certainly Buddhist and Eastern philosophies, look at. So it's once we begin to place ourselves in our own consciousness as that tiny little speck of time and individuals, we begin to realize that, compared to that, how we have impacted our physical environment and its implications for us over the long haul. And I think it is that realization that eludes us. And our planet is telling us a story, and we're not listening. And, sort of vital connections have been severed between man and nature. And then thanks to the interventions of man within nature itself, between people, religions, governments, commerce, and it is this connection or disconnections, I believe, that are at the origin of the accelerating climate crisis and the predicament of Mother Earth. And Mother Earth, in the manner that we know it, as a mother sustaining human life, is dying. And it's a phrase that may have sounded sort of exaggerated and top of one's hat not too long ago. But the Earth's biological decline is accelerating, and it is accelerating because of how it adapts to what we are doing. So this is an adaptation process, because the planet is going to survive. It is the form and manner in which it's going to survive, and how it reacts to what we're doing to it is what we're seeing. So nature never makes mistakes. We do, and so we are at the cause of what is now unfolding. And simultaneous to that is that the ongoing degeneration of the planet is bred of our lack of attention to it. It's lack of attention to our mother, apathy, greed, ignorance, sort of the dominant human values that prevail, and it has left us with the feeling as if we have to make a choice between saving our planet and our own happiness, well-being, and prosperity. And that's not true. So when we're looking at regenerating the planet, it is not just about bringing the planet back to life, but in a sense bringing each of us back to our human potential and to our humanity and our relationships with each other, with technology, commerce, livelihoods, and the rest of the planet. So I think one of the challenges is that we are tending to look at the issue of climate crisis and change, which is now at hand, as how we can tweak little things here and there. What can we do to reduce carbon emissions? Can we have more efficient aircraft, or stop using plastic bags? And so really, in a sense, we're looking to try and tweak the externalities rather than really look at these core issues that sustain and nurture life and make us human. So it's sort of in a sense that humanity has slipped away from the human species. I think that sort of that sense of values, and so we just look at the crisis as one of warming of the planet, and so it's not that the climate is changing, but what the warming is going to do to life on the planet. And somehow that always feels distant and remote. And the agents of change are really those who are going to be listening to us having this conversation, though you've been keeping silent for a long while. But anyway, so solving the climate is often seems an unnatural act, one that we are ill-equipped, to do. How do we go about it? Our minds just don't work that same way. The idea of a future existential threat is very remote. I mean, we are good and capable of problem solving when it is something immediate or tangible. I mean, when there was COVID, there was an incredible accelerated mobilization of science and discipline and interdependence and all these wonderful values, and then it just slip away. Or there's sort of an impending and warning of a typhoon or something like that, then we just galvanize. But this is something. So I think that it is that if we want to get the attention of humanity, we're going to have to, I think, focus on the quality of human life and living that is not isolated from the climate crisis, but that is now engulfing us.
Thank you. I want to ask you it's a very potent question and loaded. Happiness. Now, this is really talked about a lot. And I definitely know that the Eastern sort of concept of happiness and the more Western concept of happiness, they are very different. Would you please talk a little bit about the sort of from the wisdom teachings perspective of happiness, because this is a kind of fundamental issue with change?
Well, it's an issue. I think I often struggle with what are sort of non-conceptual experiences and understanding, and I fear that happiness, the craving for happiness has accelerated ever since it was inducted into the American Constitution as a legitimate entitlement, because the Constitution grants you that or facilitates you in being happy.
Mhm.
And I think that there are many problems with the word and what it connotates, and that is very intimately linked with our economic systems and capitalism, which rides on nurturing and encouraging and facilitating the belief that happiness can be acquired through material goods and services and relationships, which are based on fulfilling material of sort of more physical needs, the physicality of materiality, in a sense of speaking. And I think the Eastern traditions had a variety of different words, and so if you look at happiness as an emotion, and I think that there was research that said that there are less than, say, 50 words in the English language that refer to different emotions, and actually even fewer of them, and if you were looking at everyday usage. And so in Tibetan Buddhism, we have about 1,800 different words that connotate the range of emotions and feelings that we can encounter. So, I mean, I was just posing that as a challenge of looking for specific equivalents or understanding of the idea of happiness. So I would just say that look at the causes of unhappiness will be easier than seeking happiness, because I think that is counterintuitive in our context, in the sense that what the Western vocabularies and Western seeking seems to imply. So, and again, to look at the Buddhist experience, and so when the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree after 6 years of very rigorous practice. So it wasn't that he just sat under the tree and something spontaneously happened to him. He had developed a deep experiential realization of the true nature of reality. So it wasn't just conceptual; it was a realization, a knowing. And so when he stepped out of away from the tree, and he just wondered what he could do with his realization, which had transformed him and his reflexive response to the world around him. And so he went and agonized about it, and then felt that it was something that he couldn't teach or talk about, but he could help people recreate the method that he had used in order to arrive at this realization. And so it was juxtaposed with a verbal articulation, which kept changing depending on the audience that he was addressing, and sometimes even seemed contradictory. And so when the time came when he was dying for him to leave his body, he told his followers that my word is not final, and it must stand up to the scrutiny of your reason, logic, and experience. And so one of the things that Western, I hate these labels. I mean, we're doing it in the East too. So it just become a euphemism, our Western and Eastern. Is really is being fed a visual and conceptual vocabulary of a concretized imagery of happiness, which it then seeks to recreate in the lives of its communities. And there is that sort of economic reason for it, is that unless you create need, we're not going to buy more goods and services. And if we don't buy more goods and services, How is our economy going to grow? And so it just becomes an unending series of acquiring relationships and concrete. And I don't need to sort of go into that. So the Buddha's delivered 4 noble truths, and I'll just stay with the first noble truth here is, and he said the truth of suffering, and actually he didn't use the word suffering. This was used by Western translators, and this is where the problem starts when you look at Eastern philosophy. It's either seen as one of abnegation, of giving up, of abandoning, of extreme asceticism. And so what the Buddha was really saying was unsatisfactoriness. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather pick up on this word, this phrase. Why do we feel a dissatisfaction with our lives? And it is really because we have lost touch with the true nature of reality. So if I see a fire and I know that if I put my finger into it, my finger will burn. The reality of the fire is that my finger will burn if I put my finger into it, and so I don't. So the logic here is that if we can begin to see the true nature of reality, both sort of in our intimate environment and in the larger global context that climate change is unfolding, we will not do silly and stupid things. And so what are the pillars of that true nature of reality that we need to see and recognize? And so the method that the Buddha taught helped nurture and cultivate not just an intellectual understanding of this, but a transformative realization. So I'll just sort of briefly reflect on that, because I think if we begin to reflect on what is happening to Mother Earth, we will immediately recognize and see the connections, that these are as important for Mother Earth as they are to our individual selves, even as there is the largest synchronicity what happens to Mother Earth and happens to us. And so that has to do with the key idea of impermanence, that to recognize that everything is impermanent, everything constantly changes. And so we know that even Mother Earth, within our own lifetimes, Mount Everest has grown taller. The new car that we bought has got its first scratch. The man or the woman we loved has grown older and has got wrinkles. And Yuval Harari, the great sort of Jewish philosopher, has talked about how we are going to all have to learn to embrace change. And the best training that we can give ourselves is philosophy, because most people on the planet are going to have at least 4 or 5 jobs in their lifetimes, different careers, that many partners. So there's a lot of change to embrace. And similarly on the planet, that as the populations grow, and we make more demands on Mother Earth to sustain us, we are going to adapt. We're going to have to adapt to change in ourselves and simultaneously with the planet, so that balance can be maintained. So this aspect of the recognition that of impermanence and change, and simultaneous to that is, again, it's a no-brainer. It's just the basic principles of science, that everything has causes and conditions. So the earth is in the form and manner it is to sustain us because of certain causes and conditions that the planet arrived at over millennia, eons and eons of time. And so if we begin to change the causes and conditions within which the planet has flourished, then the planet is going to change. And if the causes and conditions that the planet then creates for us means that we are going to be impacted. And this is really not rocket science. It's just sort of plain everyday experience. And so it's really not just about what is happening to the environment or what we're doing to the oceans. Of course it is. But it's when we begin to look at this, at the very intimate, personal level of our actions and experiences that it could hopefully begin to have that larger impact, that larger canvas.
Rajiv, there is many wisdom teachings which refer to the inherent design of human beings to be dissatisfied, because unless there is that element of dissatisfaction, we would not evolve. We would just stay where we are, and we wouldn't have the inner need or push to grow, to be more curious, to explore. So this is where the whole system becomes quite paradoxical, especially for people who are in a much more linear sort of thinking mindset, that how do you put these things together? You're dissatisfied, change is imminent, but what if that change is going to be a negative change in comparison to what you have been previously experiencing? So this is where this duality of negative and positive, survival, thriving, adaptation, all of these nuances, I think become intimidating and overwhelming for people, and which is what is happening now.
I don't think that that all philosophies believe that, and certainly I think sort of the Buddhist and Hindu traditions do not, and again they say that dissatisfaction comes because we were confused about the true nature of reality. I mean, there's nothing that you can do. If you put your finger in that fire, it's going to burn. Now, if you delude yourself, and there are different variations of that, and so the practice, what the Buddha was really saying was that, it's often, people say that it's nihilistic, and although Eastern religions talk about giving up desire, that's not true. I think, the desire to, say, for example, help other people, or the nurturing of compassion, is the other pillar that I was going to come to. That and again, and that comes from compassion, grows out of the idea of interdependence. And so, of course, you have impermanence, and then from impermanence you move to interdependence. And we remind ourselves. I mean, again, forget the the larger universe of the planet. But just as we are interdependent on each other, on the number of people who make our cup of coffee possible, and somebody grows the coffee and they probably use some fertilizer or not use fertilizer if it's an elite expensive coffee. It's harvested, it's packaged, it's processed, it's delivered to you. And then just start beginning to think of the doctors and the hospitals and the teachers and one's mother. I mean, why do we refer to the earth as Mother Earth? Because it's the mother and our parents, the sperm and the egg that came together that made our very existence possible, and mother's milk and the nurturing of it. So when it's that intimate, and intimately felt and experienced interdependence, we are happy to just put it aside for the comfort and pleasure that and the pride that the latest car or cell phone will give us. Now, that is ignoring reality. Now, there is no, what does one say to someone who insists on putting his finger in the fire? It's going to burn you, but I'm still going to do it. Well, it's going to burn, period. So I know it sounds simplistic, but, and that is why we urge meditation, because meditation is really the process of reminding ourselves and making real for us, the principles in our everyday engagement that are as reflective of the personal unhappiness that we often experience as it does with our relationship to the planet. It is a microcosm that it mirrors the macro relationship and the great tragedy of the human species, that both are simultaneously going awry. And so, I mean, from our perspective, we would propose that it's important to work at both dimensions. So it's not just about United Nations conferences on climate change, but I think we also need initiatives such as yours, this conversation and what you're putting together, that begin to plant the seeds of our personal processes of change that will reflect or juxtapose or harmonize with the, with what unfolds on the planet. And the possibility of hope, perhaps, is that the rate of understanding and awakening about the climate, crisis is certainly increasing exponentially, and it seems to be even skyrocketing. Because for a lot of people, it has become experiential now. I mean, in our own lifetimes, it's something that we thought would happen 50 years later, and we were worrying about our children and their children, the children's children. But even for the elderly, as for the young, as weather becomes even more, sort of disruptive, and awareness about concern increases. And so there is just the hope that the movement to reverse the climate crisis will evolve simultaneously to our own efforts to transform the human species and our relationships. And it will be the largest movement in human history. It'll have to be.
Absolutely.
So,
what would be, from this from this perspective, what would be a cross-pollination of spiritual knowledge, science, and indigenous knowledge systems? What would that look like?
well, I think that again, from our perspective, and again, when I say I talk substantially about the Buddhist perspective, and more so about the Dalai Lama, that in our quest for the true nature of reality, we have to be open to all perspectives on that. So, and recognizing that each one of them, it's like different traditions of medicine. You may believe in whatever form of alternative medicine, but if you have a heart attack and you want to survive to try alternative medicine, then you go to a hospital. And there are different shades of that. It is when we begin to, it really is the innate, problem. Again, I mean, I keep using human species because I no longer see ourselves as individuals, but on a much larger canvas on the planet. It is that, we have lost our inclusiveness. Whether it is between different communities, whether it is between science and religion or spirituality or the indigenous traditions. I think each one of them has something to offer. And as the Buddha said, that whatever our assumptions are, and whatever the teachings of science, of Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, or whatever might be, they must stand up to the scrutiny of reason, logic, and lived experience, and not lived experience in a cave, but lived experience in community. And I think the minute we recognize that with humility and respect, there is no problem between the discoveries of science. I certainly know that in our tradition in Buddhism, the monks are now, being taught science, physics, chemistry, maths, cosmology, and even conducting laboratory experiments, and without feeling threatened by science, and looking at science as another instrument for our learning. The problem arises when science or scientists, and I think usually of the lesser variety, have an arrogant certitude about science, which in itself has had the strength to disprove itself as the years and centuries go by. So the science of 500 years ago is very different to the science of today. So why must the science of today have the arrogance that, look, I mean, what we say is now true and this is the way it is, without the openness of science, why 500 years ago, a year ago, has often been disproved. And that doesn't diminish science in any way.
I think that's actually one of the major points here, because there's a certain degree of absolutism which goes with stability. And there's a certain, and the nature of reality is actually based on constant change. So therefore, to embrace those on an everyday, literally moment-to-moment level is what is challenging, I think, for most people.
Actually, I want to interrupt, sorry, because
Please.
it is not, the nature of reality is not based on change. It is based on where you are. And the very presence, this is what quantum theory is telling us, that there is no absolute reality, and reality is dependent on the observer. So the reality of someone who's very poor in a slum in wherever in India, and Bill Gates. So Bill Gates may be somewhat in the middle, but whoever, I won't take a name, of someone who's very wealthy will be completely different, and their willingness to extend themselves to experience reality as it affects the other is challenging. So so change is only one component of reality, and and it is the recognition that reality can be different. My reality can be different to yours, our experienced reality. And also to recognize that, and which is why the Buddha said, look, I'm not going to get into this discussion of how the universe is created and whether there is a creator God or not, because I can't really know. And I have to base this on, so in that sense, many of our traditions are more sort of in the nature of philosophies than religion, because the obligation of philosophy is to stand up to reason and logic. Whereas religions don't feel that obligation. I mean, it is, it is the word of God, and so be it. And I think very often the clash of civilizations, not entirely as what Huntington said, but it really has to do with this dimension. So if a particular faith has promised you that X will happen if you follow the Y path, then it becomes very difficult. And mind you, I mean, this might sound like heresy, but it is at some point that the human species either recognized that there was a God, there is one, and then began to limit themselves to it. And so it is, I mean, is God a human creation, or did God create human beings? I mean, that's an area that could get us into all kinds of trouble. But I think there are some of these areas in our belief systems that we follow that can get us into trouble. But having said that, I think that the creativity of our philosophical systems is that I cannot imagine any religious or philosophical tradition urging or requiring or implying a disrespect for Mother Nature. I think that is so inherent in all our traditions, in whichever form and manner. So if I propose a hypothesis, which is all I can claim to be doing, it really is because it draws on my experience and my reality, and I could extend it to ours of a certain community. Now, I wouldn't expect someone from a completely different philosophical tradition and a different social and economic context to be able to buy into it as I articulate it. And I think that is one of the challenges that we are facing, that climate change conferences are emanating from Paris and sort of, the elite spaces of the world. And again, as I was talking, sort of in my earlier ramblings, that about the conceptual and the non-conceptual and the experiential, and how we as a species need to evolve and change, it cannot be, one size, fits all. And hence, I think for me and His Holiness too, it has now become talking about humans and humanity and mankind and species. Because if we begin to look at each other as that community, at that level of community and partnership, as opposed to Hindus and Christians and Muslims and the developed world and the underdeveloped world and Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, I think that this is a call to action, to a spiritual revolution, which has to bridge those, and it cannot happen with a singular vocabulary.
Absolutely, and so well put. And this actually brings our whole thing together, because the theme of the summit, the Mothership Earth Summit, is designing a new planetary narrative. Now, it's not one planetary narrative. Obviously, it's the point is that there are these incredible changes going on within the planet, and through cosmological and all sorts of influences, that it creates the opportunity for humanity to come together and share different narratives and actually really be able to experience the true nature of reality in what will stand up through time with some of these narratives and what will become redundant. So having said that, inherently, the objective of the summit is about deepening our relationship with the living world through a combination of wisdom teachings, science, and daily practices, so we can live more responsibly in the biosphere and with the biosphere. So could you just suggest some practices we can adopt in our daily lives to experience this?
I think that, this operates at two levels. One is sort of the larger canvas where I would, I'd say that I think that we need to fall back in love with our planet and see the connection between the earth and ourselves. And in doing so, we cannot but heal the planet. And so, at the mundane level, the more that we can go out into nature and the tactile feeling of the earth and plants and walk barefoot on the grass and look for these sort of tactile relationship and connections with the planet, which are deeply woven into our traditions. And if architects would begin to look at ways that they can take us closer to the earth than to the moon in the structures we build, and to nurture this, His Holiness calls it interdependence. There's another famous Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, and who called it interbeing. And there are sort of, many variations of that, and to begin to look at, how our actions, or for want of a word I recall, the catastrophic convergence is a phrase that I've often used, has othered the earth. From us. So I think the first step is to look at ways. I could talk about it, and I will maybe suggest a few, practices, meditation practices that relate to it. But I think, it is something we have all experienced, but not reflected on. the beauty of Mother Earth when we are looking at a sunset, or looking at the sky. I mean, something is born in us, as some kind of connection with us, with it emerges, and we all have this urge to be connected, to love and to be loved, and to embrace, to be in the embrace nature, to be in the embrace of nature. And we had there's a practice and some tradition of tree hugging, just going and hugging a tree, and I think that is and when you sort of when you love someone, you want to say, look, I want to take refuge in you, I want to look after you, I want to. So, and I think that nature offers that. And we have become so alienated physically from nature that we now have to hang beautiful photographs of nature in our homes to remind us of nature. and of course, nature in that pristine sense is shrinking. And so it's that much more difficult to access it. And urban development models are changing. Certainly even in developing countries, and we're looking for more concrete. And so I think that would be one sort of very practical, everyday way of doing that. And in our meditations, to be I mean, what is meditation? Meditation is really familiarizing our mind with an idea repeatedly. So that it becomes second nature to us. I mean, there's a lot of vocabulary, there's a lot of methodology about how you should breathe, how you should sit, and the things that you do when you meditate, and different kinds of meditation. But the essential principle of meditation, as we understand it, is familiarizing our mind, and in a sense, exercising our minds in that process of familiarization. So let me just explain that. I mean, we will spend so much of our lives and so much of our time learning how to appreciate classical music, or to learn to play an instrument, or whatever skills, to become a better driver, a better golfer, or what have you. But how little time we will find for the most essential aspect of our lives is our relationship to our Mother Earth. And so, from visualizing beautiful sunsets, and to visualizing nature and experiencing nature through visualizations when we are not able to access it, and into that visualization, or into that familiarization, is to keep reminding ourselves. I mean, I just used the example of coffee. It could be chocolate, or it could be something else that we're really fond of, or even material objects like our cars. And where do the elements of the car come from? I mean, they come from Mother Earth. Yes. And they're sourced from there, and then they go through this long cycle of production, which then spews carbon and other chemical into our river, and carbon into the air. So it really just is a question of reflections and reaffirming that. And so one of the sort of common meditations here is to reflect on our mother's love, and to see the connection between how Mother Earth sustains us and our mother sustains us. So if we sit down quietly and we start visualizing our mother, and I know this has been a problem sometimes when we have suggested this enterprise in the West. Again, forgive this generalization that a lot of people have very complex relationships with their mothers. So I mean, just find an object or an individual who has given you unqualified love, even if it is your pet, that's fine. And to use that example and actually feel the sensations of love, of touch, of the warmth, of the particular fragrance of that individual or pet, and hold that in your imagination and in your sensorial experience. And then normally we either begin to extend that to Mother Nature and look at how Mother Nature, the sun, gives us warmth, and without it we couldn't survive. Or we can receive air from Mother Nature, that the trees purify the air. So it really is to evolve for oneself, and this is an interesting pointer. We will try and evolve the specific practice. I'm giving you the general trend of it that would do this. But it is important that we bring it from Paris, from the Paris conference, to our immediate lived experience.
Absolutely, which is
and I
what
want to
we're
say,
doing.
and I want to say experience, not merely up here, but here, and the felt experience of our relationship to nature, and look at ways that can be reinforced, so that it then begins to, make us more conscious and mindful, so that the little things add up. So each time, I know when His Holiness leaves the hotel room, he'll go right around the room, shutting off all the lights. And so there are those little gestures that we can make. Of course, the cliche is that they add up, but more than them adding up in terms of conserving electricity, it reminds us of our relationship, of that chain of relationship with Mother Earth. And I think that's what we keep needing to remind ourselves, and those we engage with, and those we share Mother Earth with.
Rajiv, that's an absolutely powerful point, because this reconnection with our own mothers or mother figures, I think, is really a very core relationship. So we'll end there, and this is perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And your wisdom. And
you are kind and generous, and good luck with the summit. And I think that's a very, very important initiative. And I am disappointed that it isn't happening in person, because the energy, the connectedness that we're talking about. So one day, sometime, I think it's important that, just like we have Paris with all the sort of the big gun economists and scientists, that we can establish this kind of human connect.
Absolutely, that is the plan.
And heart and emotional level. So that
is absolutely
far more important than all the things we can say.
Honestly, that is the plan. And we just this year, it was a little bit awkward to get things.
So let me send you and everybody who's watching this and the conference a big virtual hug. Zing.
Beautiful. Thank you. And we look forward to your next,
seeing you again soon.
In presence collaboration and interaction with you at the summit next year.
God bless. And
thank you.
Thank you. Bye.